You are currently the only person in this conference.
Hello everybody, I'm starting to see everybody filter in. Just not starting yet, just saying hello, encouraging everybody to maybe start talking in the chat, catching up. As always, the simplest first question to ask of everybody is what time is it where you are? I always like asking that, just so I know exactly how awake everybody's going to be. Again, don't panic, not starting yet, there's a good 5 minutes yet before we start. 1:30, 9:30, 6:30. Look, that's actually all very civilised. It's currently 11:30 in the morning here. You've slept, Anna. To think of all the things you've missed. I should have thought, John, it would be an interesting time. How's the internet holding up this time around? Have you found a good workaround for a decent internet connection yet? Oh, fantastic. So you're going to present next year then? All right. Now, did anybody see this the first time round? This is actually my repeat session. So this is round 2 of this presentation, which means theoretically I'm going to do it better. Lots of fresh faces. I don't think everybody's got their computers just yet. Well, what I'll do is I'll turn my camera and mic off. You don't need to see this. This unshaven face stainer coming now as we get into day 3 of iMoot. But I will say I like to start this issue a few minutes late. I always find that we get people coming in about 5 minutes late. So I know my moderator is listening. Maybe we'll due to start at 11:35. I feel sorry for those who try and keep exactly to the calendar, which of course means that they're a little bit late to come. So yeah, I'll turn the camera and the microphone off, and I'll say T-minus 5 minutes from now and counting.
Hi, this is Vinny from the iMoot team and Pukunui. Here to introduce somebody else. I've done a few of the introductions of people that really don't need introductions. You'll know him, the Moodle man, Julian Ridden, another one of the iMoot and Pukunui team. Here to pose the question. There is no such thing as e-learning. Thank you very much. In fact, actually, while I've got you, thank you very much, Julian, for all of the hard work, everything that you've done behind the scenes for the iMoot. It is a massive, massive task. I know you've had very little sleep. I really think it's appreciated by the whole of the community. So, thank you very much.
Hello everybody. Well, first of all, let's actually start with gratuitous backslapping. What Vinny doesn't also tell him is that normally I end up putting hours and hours of work into setting up iMoot. And this year, Vinny did a large amount of the work, and he kind of forgets to mention that when he thanks me. So while it's on, yes, I sleep little. It's awful, because not only do we actually have a roster here of organisers, and to prove it exists, unrelated to my presentation, but here is a roster, and it says I'm meant to be on for a few hours and then go home. But the problem is there are so many good sessions here. I actually don't want to go home. So yes, part of my not sleeping is mostly self-created. So please do not think you have to give me too much sympathy. If anything, though, I'm trying to earn the hardcore badge. The hardcore badge is for those that go hard and actually, they can go home, can't they? Because most of you are watching it from home. But that's another story. We're not here to talk about iMoot. We're here to talk about big, grandiose statements, such as there is no such thing as e-learning. The idea behind this presentation, just so you know, obviously, as part of the team, we try and put a couple of presentations in. And I'll be honest, I actually ran out of time this year to do my second presentation. So I was really struggling to think, look, what can I do? And one of my staff actually said to me, well, look, why don't you do something you're passionate about? And I realised that this statement, there's no such thing as e-learning, is something that I harp on about a lot. And so I want to continue it. Now, we'll be honest, what you're watching here is cobbled together from slides from a whole bunch of different presentations. It's great when I set a low expectation as a presenter. I have copied these slides from presentations, but the point I want to make is incredibly valid, and hopefully you'll be able to. It's a Franken presentation. John, I love it. I'm going to use that term from now on. This is indeed a Franken presentation, but hopefully the point is clear. It is something I'm certainly very passionate about. Now, unless I get complaints about bandwidth, I'm going to leave the camera on. I enjoy talking to people, and I want you to see me, and I want you to see me get excited or depressed. I want you to see me get angry. However, look, if bandwidth becomes an issue, if things are really starting to struggle, do let me know in the chat, and look, if we need to turn it off, we'll turn it off. So without further ado, let's kick in. There is no such thing as e-learning. As mentioned, my name is Julian. I've been working around the Moodle traps now, coming up to 9 years. I'm trying to keep focus here. Leo, we are not doing Moot pets. Focus. Many of you know me. I know I have the attention span of a gerbil. Everybody's seen Up. I'm like the dog. Squirrel! That's me. So I want to watch the chat, but I'll try and keep focused. And so my name's Julian. I've been using Moodle for about 9 years. My background is actually as an educator first. I'm an educator before I became a technologist. I used to work in adult education, working with large companies like Telstra and Optus, which were two large telcos here in Australia. And after that, kind of focused on IT startups. So I used to work with lots of small IT companies in the roles of training manager and knowledge-based manager. Yes, this is before we had e-learning systems. We used to have knowledge bases. Then we had the IT bust of the early 90s, which hit Australia pretty hard and kind of went around the world. And so when that kind of happened, and I think I had about 6 redundancies in 7 years, which paid for a house, but it was kind of stressful. So I decided I'd have a career change. I was passionate about education. I thought, what part of the world is kind of safe from redundancies? And I thought, well, schools. Yeah, I can do that. And I fell into secondary education purely because I was looking for a safe haven. Turns out it was a fantastic move. I absolutely love secondary education. For those of you, that's an Australian term, I fear. Yeah, that's what we call year 7 to 12. Children from the age of about 13 to 18, 19, depending on which state that you're in. And my focus was modern and ancient history. And I did that for about 4 or 5 years. But the problem was, when I joined the school sector, they kind of discovered I knew technology. They discovered I had a passion for it. And next thing you knew, I became an IT manager as part of my teaching load. The reason I tell this story is really important, though, because I actually come very strongly from a pedagogy background. I believe the technology there is to facilitate the methodology I'm wanting to deliver. I shouldn't be changing my methods to technology. Technology should be changing or picked to suit me. And that's something this presentation is going to talk a lot about. I think we get too caught up in the technology, we get too caught up in these terms, such as e-learning, that it does create a significant issue. It's also worth talking about where this moniker Moodle Man came from. I like to think of myself as not egocentric or up myself. The reason where Moodle Man came from is 9 years ago, I discovered Moodle as part of a school. I was asked to find an e-learning system, and I looked around, and I kind of shortlisted 4 programs. And one of them was this fledgling little 1.4 version Moodle. It had a relatively small community at the time, but I just fell in love with it. And I'm going to talk about how I fell in love with it in this presentation, because I think it's important for you to hear it. But what happened was, because I became an expert, I think we were the first school in New South Wales to use Moodle. Once I implemented it and started exploring with it, I became quite the expert. And all the schools, this is what was called an independent school, a non-government school. We're all part of what's called the AIS, the Australian Independent Schools. And we share information very happily. A great thing about educators is that we don't see other schools as competition, which is weird in private schools, but we don't. And we actually help each other out. We got to a point over the years when if someone had a problem in Moodle or thinking of getting Moodle, they'd see me at a conference or at a venue and say, that's the Moodle man, he can help us. And yes, by about the 4th year, most of the IT managers and teachers were referring to me as the Moodle man and the Moodle guy, rather than Julian, because I couldn't remember the name. And so that's where it came from, and it kind of stuck. So that's my background. I work for a company called Pukunui. I hate marketing slides, so that's all you're going to hear. If you want to hear more about us, there's a sponsor session coming later on, but you're not here to be sold to, so that's about as much information as you're going to get about that. So, here is the important slide. Warning. This presentation has been designed to offend. Yes, this is going to hurt more than a TV show called Can of Worms. It's going to hurt your sensibilities more than an episode of Neighbours. It's going to be a blood sport. I like that term. No, what I mean by this is that I've intentionally wanted to create some grandiose statements that will be contentious. They will be opinionated, intentionally so. I use the word opinion very carefully, because an opinion is something that is based on my experiences, based on what I've been through, and have strongly formed my opinions of how I do things moving forward. And the reason I stress that is that my experience is from secondary education and adult education in blended learning environments, and have been using a specific tool, in this case Moodle. I'm not even going to talk about that. That's another whole presentation. But good one, Lynn. Now, the first thing I want to ask before I move forward, yes, there is audience participation. Can you put in chat, are you in a blended environment or are you 100% online? Just so I can understand. Are you a blended environment, you're doing face-to-face and online, or are you in an environment where you're 100% online? While you're answering, excuse the energy drinks. How do people survive iMoot? Simple. Sugar and caffeine and sugar. And yet somehow keeping awake, that makes me lose weight. Okay, fantastic. I'm thinking most people here are blended. The reason I ask is I'm not trying to take anything away from 100% online. In fact, I'm going to talk about 100% online. But this presentation very much comes from my experience in a blended classroom, and so there will be a strong lean towards those kinds of discussion points. All right, moving forward. What is Moodle for? The reason I ask this is the question that many people do. They pick this technology, and I'm not going to ask a question, I think you all know. The biggest reason that Moodle is installed in an organisation, be it a corporate or a school or a polytechnic or a government organisation is because it's free. They haven't done a needs analysis, they haven't said what's best for education, it's usually picked for the wrong reason. So they put it in there and then they say, oh, what's Moodle for? And the reason I put this as the first question is that's actually the wrong question to ask. We don't put in the tool and think, what is the tool for? We should be going, what do we need, and then how do we use the tool? And this is something I should want to put to you very, very early on, because it's all these organisations that focus on technology first and implementation second that actually have the most issues. And I know many of you here actually know me, it's great seeing so many names I'm recognising. It's something that should be going on, even if you weren't involved in the decision process. You know, maybe you don't even like that Moodle was chosen, you wanted to have something else. If it's there, rather than what is Moodle for, you should be thinking, what do I want to do and how can I go through and implement? And the reason I put that question up early is because, well, statements like this come up. Now, I'm actually going to talk more about this as a slide in more time. Again, this is where I apologise. This is a bit of a Franken presentation. I'm going to use that term moving forward. But what we're talking about is this idea of e-learning. I hate the term e-learning. I refuse to use the word e-learning. Now, here's my little corny line. Feel free to steal it if you want. There is no such thing as e-learning because learning already has an E in it. The reason I hate the term is when you talk about e-learning, it suggests that it's a different style of learning. It involves a different method of teaching. This presentation is to strongly disagree with that statement. It is a set of different tools, but it does not require a different type of learning. Your students still learn the same way. If they're kinesthetic, that won't change because they're in front of a computer. If they're oral, if they're textual, none of that shifts because I'm in front of the screen. They're exactly the same student they were in the classroom. But when we talk about e-learning, teachers forget all about this and they start thinking they have to build differently. Now, next question. How many of you, I'll ask this nicely, how many of you have a friend who has a course that looks like this? PDF, PDF, PDF quiz. PDF quiz, Word document, PDF quiz. How many of you have a friend who has a course like that? I'm glad Maureen's asked that question. First of all, is there something wrong with that? It depends on the purpose. Now, first of all, yes, I do have an issue with it, but let me explain why. Moodle, for me, I use as a form of augmentation. Now, I want to say you're not kidding. I know you may have been, but it's actually important when I come back to that statement, Maureen, so I'm glad you said it. But for me, it was in blended classrooms. This slide was actually added intentionally for Anthony Borrow, who's a major Star Trek nut and came to the session the first time we did it. Moodle is not here to replace my classroom, or my training room, or my lecture hall. Moodle is here to augment it. What do I mean by augmenting? It means I want to take my teaching practice I'm doing face-to-face and be able to augment it online to engage students in a 24/7 world, to engage students on demand, to be able to do things online that I haven't had time to do face-to-face. Also, as Teresa said, I do like the idea of resistance is futile, but that is not the point I'm trying to make. In fact, Martin's going to hate me for this. We talked about, I talked about steampunk yesterday, and someone said, we should call it Moodle punk. The idea of an augmentation of something that's there to make something better. And so, yeah, poor Martin will never forgive me. You give me Photoshop and nobody is safe. So what do I mean by augmentation and how do we do this? Well, let's first of all talk about what I mean when I said that Moodle's not different, that e-learning doesn't exist, that it's only learning. One of the biggest statements is that online learning, or in Australia we used to call it connected learning, fails because users are disconnected. Now, what do I mean by this statement? Here's a question. It's a leading question because I think by that very nature of the slide, you'll know I'm leading with this. What is one of the biggest reasons that students come to a school or a university, to an institution of learning? What's one of the reasons that they actually turn up? Now, and let's be honest, and let's just talk away that they had to for a second. Let's say that you don't have to come. A question was asked in a different session. If we took away the need to go to school, would they still go? And I actually said yes, they would. Not everybody. But if they had to go to school, would they still go? And I strongly believe yes. And as Libby's pointed out, and yes, I know I was kind of fishing for it, I put the slide up there. One of the biggest reasons that students go to an organisation is for socialisation. Socialisation, hanging out with friends. At university in Australia, I can't speak for everywhere else in the world, but in Australia, one of the busiest places in a university is the pub, the bar. The Macquarie University Bar is renowned in Australia. In fact, Macquarie is called the social uni because of their bar. In fact, many universities are renowned for their online bar. It's a slight segue, but a big university over in Europe, I won't embarrass them by saying the name, and to be also honest, I think I've forgotten. I know it's a German-speaking country, so that does limit it significantly. Created the university in Second Life. They created this huge, big virtual university that students could enter. And they did a presentation, and they mentioned that if I think of what room they spent the most time building in their online university, in this 3D world, it wasn't the lecture hall, it wasn't the campus grounds. The room in the virtual campus they spent the most attention on was the bar. Because even in this virtual space, the students would, after sitting in a virtual session, would take their avatar into the bar and talk and dance. And the important thing about it is that it's very important because socialisation, both formally and informally, keeps our students engaged and connected. What do I mean by formal? Well, inside our classroom, of course we have formal communication. We'll have group-based tasks. We'll have everybody give a presentation to the room or write something and then show it to everybody else. We do formal communication processes. But there's also a lot of informal. Informal has been happening already in this room because as I've been talking, even though I wasn't asking questions, you're already exchanging ideas in the backgrounds. Is that a Windows sound? No, that's my phone giving Twitter alerts. Stop tweeting while I'm presenting people. So informal communication is actually of equal importance. A student will often learn just as much from the peer next to them in a classroom and from the playground or the lunchroom as they do inside the class. And what I mean by that, especially for those of you who would disagree with the statement, is as I'm talking, and you've detected I can be a fast talker, is that the student will go, I missed what he said. What was that? Oh, he said that. Oh, great, thank you. He mentioned that site. I didn't get it. Can you tell me what it was? Yes, this is the one I got. That's informal communication that keeps students together. This is fantastic. We know that people, that humans by nature, are communicating, that we use solitary confinement as a form of punishment. So why online do many people create courses that are built to isolate the users, that are built to actually take away communication? They just have PDF quiz. And then they wonder why retention rates drop so low. Because all of a sudden, we've taken away this ability to connect. Now, I've recently on Twitter and on the forum, people saying how much they're loving iMoot and what a fantastic event this is. And let me not talk ourselves up by that statement, I don't mean to. What makes iMoot work is the community that gets formed around it. The fact that you talk, that you guys go into forums, that you're using the Facebook group, that there is a Twitter back channel that's going bonkers and still tweeting at me. Communication is the key to this conference. Many of you may have been to online conferences where you lack that interactivity and then you get disengaged. It's so obvious when I spell it out. But yet many educators miss this because they're doing e-learning. And so what do we get? Well, as we mentioned before, when many people start building courses, they build repositories, what we used to call bag it and tag it, or pump it and dump it courses. Now, the question that was asked earlier by Maureen, and she said she was joking, but actually I want to highlight the importance of this. 90% of educators start Moodle by bagging and tagging, creating a repository, especially in blended learning environments. We're teaching face-to-face. We're going to direct them to go there and get it. It is not evil, it is the first step. What is evil is when we never move forward from that step. And so, especially when I train, I don't want teachers to feel embarrassed that they have repository courses in a blended environment. If it's an online-only environment, you should be embarrassed because it's not going to work, and you know it's not going to work because you wouldn't want to use it. But in blended learning, yes, there is a degree of leeway here because of the targeted delivery, the directed delivery that we also give face-to-face. But what frustrates me is going back to see people who've been using Moodle for 2 years, 3 years, and are still just pumping and dumping their courseware. So, what do? Well, we want to create engagement. And the reason I bring up this slide, I want to actually highlight this. When I talk about engagement, I am not talking about bells and whistles. I'm not talking about, interactive flash environments, game-based learning, badges. I don't want to talk about bells and whistles. They are an element of engagement, don't get me wrong. But it's not what I want to refer to here. When I talk about engagement, I want to actually talk about engagement as pedagogical engagement. Now, what do I mean by pedagogical engagement? I want students to engage with my material, to engage with what I'm trying to teach them. I want them to want to query it. I want them to be able to respond to it. I want them to react, to interact, to want to go back and repeat something. I want them to be able to test the hypothesis and move it forward. And especially as a history teacher, as a history teacher, and I don't know if anybody here teaches history, as history teachers, our job is to introduce as many artefacts as possible, different points of view, to interrogate those points of view, and to form your opinions by looking at a wide range of artefact sources. This is why I talk about engagement. I don't just want to pump and dump. I really want them to engage the material. And if they can engage with the material, they will then engage with the course. Now, by the way, how do we do this? Yes, we can use bells and whistles for this. They are a tool that allows us to implement engagement, but they are just one of that. They are one of the tools. When I talk about engagement, I say, well, look, what's the best way of doing it? Well, the first thing we can do is get the perpetual motion education of communication started. Now, that's a big mouthful, the perpetual motion communication or socialization engine. What do I mean by that? Well, picture this, and iMoot has been a fantastic example of me putting this engine into motion. I want to get students to connect. If students can connect, they start talking with each other, or just through their nature of talking, they start to collaborate. And once they start collaborating with each other, well, collaboration means they start creating content through that collaboration, and so they start to contribute. The more they contribute, they start to connect more. Yes, connect, and we're going to lead to that. We call this connectivism. Now, why is it such a big deal? You have been in part of this as part of iMoot's design. I am very much a constructivist educator, and you're going to pick up on this very quickly. The very first thing you noticed when you came to this site was that you got a badge. What's the first thing you did when you had that badge? What happened to you when you received that badge? But type in the chat. When you got this badge, someone looked for others. What else did people start doing? Some people look for others. How did you start finding out how you can get badges? I know some of you have done it because I've seen your posts. When we started putting this up, and again, it's great if you didn't do it. I'm not saying everybody works the same way because everybody's got different learning style. But what actually happened was when we got that first badge, and I didn't tell you there was a badge coming, and it was quite intentional. It was a surprise. All of a sudden, there's a badge. So what happened is many of you first of all started exploring. This year, we had less demands for support about how do I use iMoot than ever before. Because rather than asking us where do I go, you were exploring on your own. And you were going to different places and seeing what was there. What you're also doing was starting discussions in the forums. If you actually go to the social forum, there is a post, not started by us, but started by attendees going, badges, what are they? And people talking about it. And then someone else started another forum saying how to get badges or where to find badges. Oh, wait a second. They started connecting together. They started without me setting some stupid icebreaker. You started connecting together to share knowledge. And then you create a forum. We started to collaborate as a group around this subject. And through that collaboration, we started actually contributing information. And by the way, if you haven't, go check out the social forum. In fact, many people, it was funny, one of the first badges you could earn was called the communication badge. Now the communication badge, for those of you who didn't know, was just using Moodle's conditionals. The social forum was marked complete after you'd done 3 posts or replies. If you did 3 posts or replies, you got the communication badge. Funny thing was, someone said, I've got a communication badge. Next person, how do you get it? I don't know. I think I'll go looking. By the time they put that 3rd post, they've just finally got a communication badge and then told somebody else, I got a badge, help me figure out how we did it. And so if you haven't been using the forums, again, we didn't direct you to. Not everybody has been working that way. Again, learning styles are different. But if you haven't, check out the social forum and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. It started this engine going. They connected, they collaborated, they contributed. By contributing, they connected with more people. And they connected with more people, they collaborated with more. It just goes round and round and round. And once it is started, it's difficult to stop. This sounds like a big deal online, but we do it all the time in classrooms. It's common sense in a classroom. Oh, thank you for that, Dot. Again, if everyone's got stuff to add, you know, I put these big grandiose things out there. If you've got things to add or publications you know about that talk about these things, please just go nuts in the back channel. In classrooms, you know, I'm a communicative teacher. You've picked up I like to talk. I think that's a rather obvious thing. But I also like doing in my classroom exactly what I'm doing here. To figure out if you've understood something, I will ask. I like creating a problem for you to solve, even if it's just in a question-answer format, because that way you understand better. That's how I start my connect, collaborate, contribute. And don't get me wrong, that was a very informal methodology I just described. Also, sometimes it's a formal task. I'm going to put you in groups of 4. And when I used to do that, I would often, like many teachers, take groups of 4 that don't normally work together, that aren't friends, and get them to collaborate. It's things we do all the time as teachers, but people forget to do online. There's no such thing as e-learning. What works in your classroom, people, works here. And of course, because we're here, we have to talk about, well, how do we do it? Now, I refer to Moodle as Swiss Army knife. I'm very keen to kind of come back to that for a second. When I do training, people get overwhelmed. You know, you turn editing on, and all of a sudden, there's this huge list of options. You know, you click on add an activity, and oh, what the hell's all this stuff? Ah, too much, take me away. And again, we have technophobia. So I always like to talk to people, and please, again, feel free to steal this analogy. Moodle is a Swiss Army knife. If any of you have ever bought or owned a Swiss Army knife, they don't come with manuals. You get a little black box. Inside that little black box is a knife, a warranty certificate, a little warranty booklet, and a certificate of authenticity. That's all that comes with a Swiss Army knife. And when you get a Swiss Army knife, you don't sit there and go, oh, this blade, what's that for? I'm going to find a reason to use that. Okay, now the next blade. You don't do that. What happens is, when a need arises, you look for the blade that's most obvious of what you want to achieve. And to give you a stupid example, I was walking home, a storm hit, and a tree fell across my leg. I can't get out, I'm under pressure. So I get my Swiss Army knife out and I take out the knife blade and I start trying to cut through this tree. And after 3 hours, I finally get through. Now, by the way, that blade worked. But next time something falls on me, I have a better look and I go, wait a second, there was a saw blade here, and it takes me 10 minutes to cut through it. It's a stupid example, I use it to be funny, but the reason I give it is because if you think of Moodle as just a series of blades, yes, you choose one that's most obvious, and sometimes the one you choose is not necessarily the best one at the time. It'll work if it's common sense. You know, I might use a forum, but then you realise that, yeah, maybe I should have used a live chat room instead. It would have got a better response. So next time you try a different blade and see how you go, and then experience tells you which ones are best, and you keep moving forward. There are some trainers out there, and I hate them. They create this huge pressure that say the best way to build a Moodle course is to use as many different tools as possible to create a large amount of differentiation to engage your learners. Can I say I completely disagree with that statement? 100%. The best course is the one that reflects the teacher's teaching style, firstly, and secondly, uses the materials that suit what they're trying to do. A maths course, we use very different tools to an IT course, we use very different tools to an English course, because we're teaching in different ways. I'm going to come back to that as we move forward. So as I said, inside of Moodle, we've got tools: galleries, blogs, forums, chat rooms, wikis. I've just shown the ones that are communication-based, because we're talking about that perpetual engine. But of course, it's a far greater list. But again, Moodle The second mistake people make, and again I bring this back to the real world, there's no such thing as e-learning. In the real world, I don't just use what's in my classroom. I have a classroom space and my 28 students will come in, but then inside this classroom occasionally I'll take them out. We'll do an excursion, a field trip. I'm going to take them to somewhere else, that, to the Canberra War Memorial, because there's a whole bunch of fantastic resources there that we can't get in my classroom. Or I'm going to invite a guest speaker to come into the classroom. One point I had 2 actors dressed up in period gear from Australia's early Federation, and in character they told stories about their life, and students engaged with it. I often will pick and choose resources and activities that come from outside my classroom. But yet, oh wait a second, in e-learning we create this walled garden. A walled garden is an isolated room where everything has to be in Moodle. And it's often not the teachers that do it. Their management, their administration will say, we've created a policy that everything has to be locked inside this defined square. But what about the outside world? Even online, and again, I didn't create this. To be honest, it's quite old. Again, stealing my old slides to make points. But again, as educators, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. When I first started teaching, I had Bloom's drilled into me, and I'd often would think as I was teaching how I could apply the Bloom system to what I was trying to deliver. And the reason I love this slide is actually talk about many of the tools that are out there that you can use alongside the Blooms, and these are all outside of Moodle. Moodle is a tool that's built, it's a scaffolding tool. Think of Moodle as that. Moodle is a scaffolding tool within which we plug and we place information. And it might be using a Moodle tool, but also it might be putting in a YouTube video or a TED Talk or a Google document that's live and allows for live facilitation. And yes, this is where training comes in, because we are talking about new tools, but it's not new methodology. That slide will be stealing. Actually, no, it's not, because it's a creative comment and I have gone through and put an attribution down the bottom. By the way, what I haven't done, I am evil here, is that is a share alike. And so please feel free, this slide presentation is already in the course, you can actually take this as long as you keep that attribution moving along. So again, this is common sense. We don't create isolated classrooms. We create classrooms and use things that suit. We bring in newspapers, we'll watch a video on a TV, I'll have a guest speaker come in. So why do we do this online? And so I'd love to have time to update this slide, because of course nowadays we've got Khan Academy, we've got all kinds of fantastic places out there that provide extra content. We've got fantastic tools out there that allow us to create interactive environments. I slot all these into a Moodle course. So we've kind of done a lot of pedagogy discussion there, and dare I say even slightly philosophical discussion. So what's next? What's my next bugbear about e-learning? Well, it's how it's designed. This really, really gets me upset. What do I mean by design? Well, the statement I like to say is that the room you're in matters. And this is proven. There's a whole bunch of studies out about this. When I talk about the room, I'm talking about the real world right here. The room that you're in makes a big difference to how students will work inside of it. Now, this is a picture of a classroom from, I think it's about the mid to late 1960s in Australia. For those of you who aren't from Australia, schools in New South Wales, pretty much predominantly around Australia, in the 60s and 70s were built, and this isn't a joke, were built on the prison model. Now, the idea of the prison model is simple. If we can oppress a student, they're easier to teach. It's easier for us to imprint our ideas on a student that's going to be compliant through feeling of oppression. I'd like to think we've moved on from then, but not everybody has. And the rooms that were built on the prison model. So what do we do in Australia? We built blocks, A block, B block, C block, D block. If anybody's here from Australia, please make sure you tell people I'm not making this up, because it sounds awful. Now, you used to have these big red or solid brick buildings, A block, B block, C block, and they're built usually around a concrete rectangle or quadrangle, we call them here, which is the central place that all of them would meet, 4 concrete blocks. Most schools in Australia were the same, and glad here New Zealand had the same problem. It actually came from the UK, to be honest. The UK is the parent of Australia. We go back to our heritage and had a big impact. Also, look at this classroom. The windows are high. The windows are designed to not be looked out of. It's to provide the bare minimum light that was needed to light up a room. The bare minimum. We don't want them to look out. We don't want them to be distracted. We don't want them to feel at all free. They are constrained to this environment. The walls are relatively barren. In fact, a few things that are up on the wall aren't the most exciting. Many schools at the time actually had huge restrictions on what you were allowed to do with your classroom. And of course, and this hasn't changed, yes, it was teacher-centred, so the teachers up the front dictating to students. So that's where we came from, and it sounds like some of you are still there. But what's happening now? What I love is that you're going down to New Zealand, because New Zealand is really leading the world in this. The polytechnics in particular have some fantastic places. We're rebuilding the classrooms. In Australia, schools, not just the private ones, the public ones, are spending millions of dollars ripping down old but still functional buildings and rebuilding classrooms. Why? Well, what we're seeing here is a classroom that's a more modern one. First of all, lots of big windows, lots of natural light. Next thing you have is it's a multi-purpose room. You see there's whiteboards on those two walls. In fact, there's whiteboards on every single wall of that room. The desks aren't locked. The desks can be moved into any way, shape or form to be used in any way that's needed. What you're seeing here is a typical example of what many of the classrooms are going towards. We hear terms in Australia such as interactive learning spaces or innovative learning spaces, or ILSs, that are designed for flexibility, that are designed to be shaped and moved to suit the need of the teacher. Schools, institutions are spending millions of dollars rebuilding these classrooms. Now, but wait a second, I thought the educator is what brought the education. I thought it was the resources that the institution had that made the education. Why are universities ripping down and rebuilding? Why are schools ripping down and rebuilding if surely the educator and the resources matter? Simply put, the room matters. Now, a good teacher can still lift up a bad room, but it's an extra amount of effort. You have this sense of depression that you have to pick them up. And a good teacher will put things on the walls or play music or use their teaching practice, but it's an extra effort. And don't get me wrong, a bad teacher can still bring down a fantastic room. You can have a room like this, but a teacher who refuses to use different walls, stands up the front, tells everybody to shut up and listen. You know, the teacher still has an impact, but the room sets the tone. And that happens in real life. And that's right, the room matters, but it's not all. It's the starting point. But yet, let's think about this in an online context. The room you're in matters. I was very lucky. I was invited over to Germany to present a session at the German Moodle Moot. One of the things I love about what I do is being invited out to present at different conferences and meeting people. And I did this presentation called Moodle is Hustlich. Hustlich is German for ugly. And this was the opening slide when people walked in. And of course, they're hearing me, they know I'm a passionate Moodle guy. And looking at this going, why is he saying Moodle is ugly? But that doesn't sound like him. And this was the opening slide. And as we got settled down and were looking rather confused, I then went to the next slide. And the next slide was this. How many of you have Moodle sites, courses that look like this? This is a PDF quiz. But this actually is a real site. I've actually anonymized it, you know, so I've just kind of blotted out the logo and put the old Moodle site instead. But this is a real training course that's used by a government organisation here in Australia. I won't say who. But this is how many people have their courseware. It could be worse. Not by much, Susie. I think the standard theme will just take the blue out. And so, of course, we talked about this for a second, and they said, no, Moodle isn't ugly. Moodle is wunderschön. You know, German for Moodle is beautiful. And all of a sudden, you know, the smiles kind of lit up. Oh, what do you mean Moodle is beautiful? And then I showed courses like this. Now, again, this isn't meant to say that this is an example for all courses. This here is a very specific example. Now, this is standard Moodle. In fact, can anybody tell me, in the middle here, what is this? Can anybody identify this in Moodle terms? What is it? No, it's not grid, not a plugin. That's right, Laura. It's just a label. So many educators don't know what to do with labels. You can use anything for labels. You can do whatever you want with labels. Now, let me just talk about this slide for a second because it's actually very specific. look at the target audience. This is actually something I built for a primary school, and we were dealing with Year 2 students. Year 2 is looking around the age of 5 and 6, many of whom don't have strong literacy skills yet, but they're being put inside an online environment. So having a site that's designed all around text, first of all, just isn't practical, it doesn't work, but also didn't engage that student. What we also mean by engagement shifts when you have different audience types, different learning styles, and that will change based on your target audience. Again, common sense. So what we had to do here was, how do I put students with low literacy? And by the way, it doesn't have to be children. Instead, we're looking at ESL, or we could look at learning support, people with learning disability. It's the same issue across multiple areas. When you've got low literacy, how do we get around it? Well, what we did was we put in a label. The students who couldn't know the name of their teacher would actually click on their picture. Now, what that would then link to was just a page. When you clicked on it, it linked to a page that told you about that teacher. Yeah, this is his spell and here's her information. Each of those buttons down the bottom linked to courses. And instead of asking the students to go to the music course, they'd all say, can you all click on the clef? Can you all click on the purple paintbrushes? Can everybody click on the blue book that says English? It's actually quite funny on the design, because what they actually did was, when they said the blue book that's called English, we're actually also teaching colour and literacy while still directing them. Even the navigation itself became a teaching mechanism. But this was a sign. Moodle by default is text-based. This is true, because Moodle is not magic. I love saying that. People expect Moodle to be this kind of magical thing that does everything for me and it has unicorn wings. Moodle is not magic. It can't magically generate a random graphic that suits your need. It doesn't magically know that you want an icon that looks like an arm that's going to sit here in a grid of 12 icons. Only you know what you want it to do. So Moodle can't be graphical by default. Yes, we could do some stuff with the theme. You know, again, we've tried to make iMoot look pretty and relatively welcoming. But because by default it works with text, teachers just stay with text. But in a classroom environment, I would never walk in and say, everybody, open up your book to chapter 2 and read that. Okay, now here's a quiz I'm going to give you, do that. We don't. Now don't get me wrong, I do that with some students, because some students are textually driven, but not all are. I also will show a video. I will also go through and do an interactive task, or start a discussion, or do something else, because in common sense, I understand that not all my students read and use repetition as a method of learning. But we forget that online, and we create these dumping grounds and just assume if I've got 15 PDFs on a site, they're going to read them and understand everything. It's common sense when I say it out loud, but many of you have educators who build that course and then complain why it doesn't work. The next thing, and this is a real issue I have, and it happened a lot with universities and polytechnics, technical colleges, this idea of validity, validation. Now here's a couple of slides to get you thinking. This is after education, I'm not talking about game-based learning, I just want to kind of prove a couple of points. Yeah, I'm actually disappointed that everybody's agreeing in here. I was kind of waiting for someone to go, it's more than that, and you're being too broad, and so far you're being remarkably easy on me. So we'll see how we keep going here. People enjoy video games because their creators put engagement before anything else. Now, so I don't want to talk about game-based learning. This is not the point of this slide. I just want to talk about what makes games successful. I remember as a child blowing a whole $5, which first of all, as a child in the 70s, is a lot of money, sitting down, putting 20-cent pieces into a tabletop version of Galaga and Frogger. And I spent a fortune on that game, and it wasn't about fancy graphics. In fact, it was all black and white at the time with coloured cellophane strips to give you colour on the glass. But I was engaged because this was a fun game that I wanted to beat, that I wanted to solve. And in fact, you know, I look at different games I play now. You know, games have become more complex, they've become more about narrative. But the creators focus purely on engagement. I want to get you sucked in. I want you to be inside this world and want to live in it. That's fantastic. Let's go to the opposite. How far away from that can I go? E-learning authors, and again, I'm using the word e-learning intentionally here, often put engagement a distant second to academic rigor. Now, I love this term, academic rigor. Many universities and TAFEs have these departments where they have an e-learning department or an online authorship department, where they have a whole bunch of people whose sole job is to create online content and then to be just pushed out for educators to use. On top of that, and this happens a lot in universities, a course has to be built. It has to be assessed. It has to be validated by a mentor or a peer or someone further up. And then once it's been validated, they lock it. Now, some of you may be familiar with this methodology. It happens not a lot in schools, but it happens a lot in adult and happens a lot with corporate and university. Oh yes, we've agreed that this meets our standards. And so we create this course and we lock it. And it cannot be changed because it is now academically valid and it meets all our requirements. Why make a big deal about that is that so many people sit on one side or the other. Now, I'm not trying to say that academic validity is not important. It's incredibly important when we're dealing with universities where we have outcomes that we have to meet in a technical college or even in schools. That yes, our resources have to be accurate. They have to be meet the outcomes that we're required to do. But it's about trying to find this balance. And it's not just about the resources. I started talking about this, people think I'm just talking about the validity of the actual resource base. No, I'm talking also about the lesson flow, how it's structured, how it's designed, all these things come into it. And when it's put into an external department, especially when those people aren't educators, they're graphic designers, they're developers, then things go pear-shaped, and they go pear-shaped very quickly. And so there's this comment I like bringing up, and actually was from one of my Twitter followers. The key to using any technology effectively is underpinning it with the right pedagogy. Well, where does the pedagogy come from? I've already established the pedagogy does not come from the system. Moodle does not create pedagogy. Moodle is not a magic unicorn. And you can feel free to quote me on that. I'd love to see that flying across Twitter. Moodle is not a magic unicorn that you can write pedagogical glory, that provides a magical rainbow paradigm that's just going to provide everything that you need. It isn't. Moodle is a box and cart. You are the horse, and what you fill your cart with is what generates this. And by the way, your box and cart can be filled with absolutely nothing but textbooks, or your box and cart can be full of dancing minstrels and music players and big banners and signs. And there we go. I was waiting for it. There goes the first tweet. Moodle itself is just the scaffold. It's just the tool inside which we place these resources. And so the fact that we're magically expecting it to do it is nuts. And it's the pedagogy first methodology. Again, this is why I said at the beginning of the presentation. So many people get Moodle and they look at the blades and think, what can I do with a forum? Or I'm going to create a forum to ask a question. And of course, no one answers it because it wasn't put there because of a pedagogical reason or to drive something forward. It was put there because I thought I should have one. I then go through and I've created a badge. And I've created a badge called You Turned Up. But no more. They've just got this one badge. And so they kind of got a little bit excited, but then lost their interest. I've created a course that actually is kind of cool, but we've locked it down. And it's not going to change for 12 months because my university has said it is valid. We have checked it. You're not allowed to shift it. All of these things just become common sense when expressed this way, but are missed because we call it e-learning. Of course, it's different. It's online. No, all those things aren't different. It has to shift. It has to adjust. And so this is a slide again I use when I'm training. And I love to highlight it because Moodle, when I picked Moodle, those 9 years ago, why did I pick it? I told you I was going to tell you why I fell in love with Moodle. I fell in love with Moodle for this reason. Every system says they support different learning styles. But again, Moodle's not doing that. You are. That's your job. I'm pointing at all of you right now. You provide the learning methodology. So it could be constructionist, it could be constructivist, it can be text-based, it can be multimedia and all focus. It can be full of practical activities they actually have to do offline. I saw a fantastic course where it showed video instructions and plans, and the students who were doing 100% online had to actually build something and take a video of it and post it back so they could actually engage the kinesthetic learner. Just because it's online didn't mean you couldn't do those kinds of tasks. So the learning methodology comes from you. But what I do love about Moodle is that it supports different teaching styles. And yes, I know I have a vendetta. I'm a Moodle lover. I'm a Moodle evangelist. But this is one of the reasons I dislike Blackboard so strongly. Now, I actually recommend Blackboard for some organisations, having just said that statement, but I recommend it because of this very reason. Blackboard is... Has anybody here actually used Blackboard before I go on? Those who have used it before understand what I mean by this statement. With Blackboard, the structure is kind of preset for you. When you add a resource, it all goes under one tab, and all the assessments go under another tab, and all the forums go under another tab. It doesn't allow for lots of design options because it lacks that flexibility. Which, by the way, in some organisations is an absolute blessing because everything's automatically put in the right place. But that lack of flexibility is what I hate so much about it, because everybody teaches different. Let me give you an anecdote, and this is from my background. This is where my opinions, this one story is where they came from. At Monty, my very first school, my favourite Moodle teacher, she's one of the biggest users, was a lady called Jane Walmsley. She was actually a doctor who taught biology. 5 years off retirement. You talk about ageism in e-learning. I hate it. I hate e-learning, and ageism is just so incorrect. If people have a passion, they find ways of using it. And Jane was the most spectacular user of Moodle. And I made my biggest mistakes. We'd had Moodle for about 8 months by this point, and I was looking at her course. And her course was, well, it was awful. It was covered in animated GIFs. You know, there was bubbling beakers, there were jumping frogs, coming back to unicorns. Actually, I still remember in a biology course, there was a little animated GIF of a unicorn. And I'm thinking, well, wait a second, what's unicorns got to do with biology? No, Susie, again, I love you. It looked like Jess, it even had an embedded MIDI file. Now, bear in mind, this is 10 years ago when things like that were still cool. Now, this was a course that, I looked at it and it was colourful and it was enough to give you an epileptic fit. And this music playing was going to drive me insane. And I went to Jane and I said, look, Jane, I'm so excited you're using Moodle. And I'm really excited that you're trying to do these different things with it. But this is nuts. You know, it's over the top. Look, you should probably just cut it back a little. And she looked at me and thought, and she said, oh, maybe you're right. And the next day, it had all gone. I regret that to this day. To this day, I regret it. Why do I regret it? Because it was only about a week later I finally walked into her classroom. Her classroom was covered in fluoro boards, you know, fluoro big cardboard with project work stuck on it. When students walked into the classroom, she actually had a CD player with music playing. She used to try and generate some energy. It was a dull classroom, for the record. She used to like generate some energy. She'd have some music playing as the kids sat down just to create some energy and some buzz. And then once they started, she'd turn off, you know, to get the lesson going. Her online course was an exact expression of her offline course. In fact, it is because of Jane Walmsley that I am the way I am today. What happened after she took it all down? About a third of the students disappeared. The stats just plummeted. Because this is what I said, I do apologize. People who are 100% online, this is slightly different. But we have blended classroom. Shouldn't we be taking that personality, that environment that the students love so much face to face? I'm going to have to keep you guys focused. We're going into ABBA. I'll build a course on Waterloo and we'll see what happens next. But yeah, so they do that. But then online, they're expected to use a template. Oh, this is my next pet hate. And this template forces them to teach a certain way. I am a communicative teacher. I use forums. I use chat rooms. I use comment blocks all over the place. But that may not be suitable for you. You might like using wikis. You might like using glossaries. You're more of a structured teacher. Mathematicians like using more of an analytical methodology and use lots of quizzes. None of these are incorrect. They are different teaching styles. And so, yeah, it's really important to make sure we do this. And while I'm not against templates in regards to making we have a standard navigation schema, it's easy to move around. Again, iMoot. There is a template at iMoot. Every course starts off with the same. But I've also let educators change it. So all your presenters have teacher rights. They want to add their own resources. As you've been moving around, you've probably seen that many of these courses look different. That some of the teachers have actually gone through and added pictures and changed it. My template was just about creating bare minimum navigation and letting them go nuts. So yeah, again, think about your face-to-face and move that online. And that's meant by about engagement not being about bells and whistles. Engagement is about how you build your room, how you fill it, what kind of resources that you use, how do I engage those learning styles and teaching styles. And all of that is nothing new. Most of you hopefully are bored to death because you've heard this all because you've been teaching for 10 years. But no. John, should we give students more change rights? My belief, absolutely. I can give students teacher rights in a forum. Because remember, you can actually give rights, not just at a course level, but also at an activity level, which means they don't get access to the gradebook, they don't get access to these high-level course functions, but I can give them more direct access. And so I use activity level rights all the time to increase what they can do. Here is a book that you all have teacher rights to, so you can all change it. I do that because many students find that easier to use than a wiki. Yeah, so really, I strongly agree. You do know that when they first created permissions in Moodle, and Martin came out and said this a few years ago, when they created the permission system in Moodle, it wasn't about restricting things. Permissions came in about 1.7. It was not about creating a system within which administrators could lock things down more. The idea of the permission system was to grant a system where people could open it up more and give more rights to people. And it's always annoyed people, educators. I know it annoyed Martin at the time, that it's being used purely as a lockdown mechanism rather than as a freeing mechanism. So long answer to your question, but absolutely I believe we should be giving students more rights. We are in a world of student-centered learning practice, but again, this also comes back to your teaching style and evolving your teachers to that level. And that's why it's great. It's per course. Each teacher can do it their own way. And that's the blessing of Moodle. Now, having just talked about courses, let's also talk about one of my favourite features that came in 2.0. 2.0 for me was a game changer for Moodle. And there are many different reasons that many of you know that new features are added, but there was one particular feature that came in 2.0 that I think changed the game. And that was the ability of completion tracking and restrict access. Now, before 2.0, and again, many of you here have been using Moodle for a while, with 1.9, you could build all this courseware material, but it was all just there. And students could jump around and do it whatever order that they like. And that's good to a degree, but as a teacher, again, come back to face, I had a lesson flow. I knew that I wanted to be able to do this, and then if they're really good, they can go there, and then here's a quiz to check some assessment methodology, and then we're going to go here. And because I didn't want them jumping all over the place. And yes, I provide some additional materials and things, but I didn't want open slather, because open slather is very difficult to direct. And I'm using the word direct rather than control. I don't believe in controlling classrooms, but we do need to provide direction to classrooms as educators. So the game changer in 2 is that Moodle was predominantly a resource base. Even if you had activities, the fact that you couldn't control that really restricted how you could use it. So in Moodle 2, for those of you who are stuck in 1.9 like Sally, we first of all gave Moodle a brain. Moodle used to be dumb, but with a brain, we first of all can now tell it, what does complete mean? Now you've actually seen us use it in this iMoot site. I said that the social forum is complete when a person makes 3 posts. And when it's complete, I can then put a condition on it that says if it's complete, then award a badge. And we use it all the time in Moodle 2. I can say, here's the resource, read this resource, then do a quiz. Once they have passed that quiz, then do the next resource and then go to topic 2. And it means I can lesson plan. And what I've just described is what I call linear flow. And it's how many people use conditionals. But again, that's not what I've ever done in the classroom. Ever. I don't think any of you will have done it. Yes, we have a structured lesson, but then we have learning pathways. We actually have branches, because if the student doesn't understand it, I've got a couple of different resources. And if they really did understand it, I might give them an additional job to do while I deal with these people who are going a bit slower. And that's not just children, that's adults, that's everybody. But yet, we build these courses where we build to this lowest common denominator. Because it's e-learning. With e-learning, we have to build to our lowest common denominator, because otherwise we'll lose them. We don't build our classes for that. Why do we do that online? It's because we screw it up. So, what do I mean by that? Here's my favourite. This is actually the one line I took from iMoot last year. There was so much cool stuff, but this one line stuck with me. Just because we build to standards does not mean it has to be built a standard way. So many organisations justify their PDF quiz and their boring course layout is because, oh, we've got standards, we've got outcomes we have to build to. So this is a standards-driven course. that holds zero water, none whatsoever. Because we can still build to standards, but have an innovative, engaging environment. See, I'm really hoping to annoy you people, and all I'm hearing is yes, yes, love it, and amen. You make it very difficult to get a rise out of you people. I'm going to say things such as, you tell you what, the Wallabies will win the World Cup this year, no other team has a choice. Wallabies to win. And then, you know, hopefully maybe I'll get some argument going. But before I create the segue into absolute cacophony and madness and anarchy, let me come back to the slides for a second. And so when I talk about that standard way, let's talk about how I do it in Moodle. A condition is just that. A condition is not a direction. A condition is an if-then. You know, for those of you who do programming, when I write an if statement, it is if this, else that. It allows me to create a yes or a no. And the really big deal about this is because what I can now do in Moodle is I can do resource, quiz. Now this quiz is not a formal quiz, it's not an assessment. This quiz is actually here because if they get less than 20%, bring up additional resource that explains it a different way, and then another quiz that might have a slightly different bent on it. And if they got over 90%, great, let's bring up a video of a nun on a treadmill as a reward because it's kind of funny. And then another resource that actually goes to a slightly higher level of knowledge. And then this will move forward to the next step. Now, the advantage of this, and by the way, this is exactly what most of us do face-to-face. It's not new. But it means that what the game changer was in 2 is it went from just being a standard scaffolding tool to actually being a lesson planning tool. I hate the lesson tool in the middle. This is just my personal bias. This is my teaching style. I'm not a big fan of the lesson tool. It has its purpose, but I'm not a huge fan. But I had to use it in 1.9 because it's the only way I could kind of do these branches. Now in 2, I don't use lessons at all. I now use courses to be my lessons. And yes, Sally, my point over again is yes, it does sound an awful lot like teaching, doesn't it? Oh, John, you are a legend. But yes, it is also so much work. I'll highlight now. It's going to come to this later, but you've brought it up, so I'm going to bring it up now. You know the biggest reason that most courses are PDF quiz? Tell me, why is your course PDF quiz? What's the biggest reason? You're passionate. You've gone to conferences like this. You want to do it all. You're not given the time. And that's the biggest issue because, again, not just the teacher. Okay, I convert the teacher. I'll do a session like this. I do sessions like this all around the world nowadays. And people leave and they're enthused and they go, I agree with everything that you said. And they go back to their organisations and they're told, we are not going to give you any extra time to do online learning delivery. Or we'll give you an hour. The time it takes me to build a course, if any of you came to my game-based learning, game dissection course session, I actually talked about this a bit. And if not, sales pitch, come to my game lessons. I actually dissect how I build a game course and go through the reasoning and the logic and the time behind it. But the time it takes me to build an online course is nearly 1-to-1 to the time it takes me to build a physical course. Because it takes the same amount of effort. I have to lesson plan it, I have to get the right resources together, I have to assemble it in a certain way. The time it takes me to plan face-to-face delivery, or the time it takes me to plan an online delivery, takes the same amount of time. Next point, Dodge. See, you guys are awesome if you're not confident. Because we actually do lots of effort to train teachers. We send them to universities, to training organisations, become, in adult learning for, Cert 4s. And we put all this effort into pedagogy and methodology, and yet we put no information into how to use this technology. And yes, Moodle 2 has become simpler, but yes, it's a tool that you need to understand. The same way that each term we used to have staff induction, staff in-services, and we'd invite speakers to talk about pedagogy or have somebody showing me how to use my new electronic whiteboard. They didn't do any of this with Moodle. And I'm going to make you jealous, but my proudest moment, my last school was a school called Riverview here in Sydney. My proudest moment was putting in a process at Riverview where built into my teacher's timetable, so not extra work, built into their timetable was one period of PD, personal development. And we actually took them out of a class for that, so it was an extra load. Now, in that one period of PD, they actually came to a dedicated training room where I had a full-time trainer who was a teacher. This was their full-time job. And this full-time person's job was, in these periods, was to actually sit down and work with staff and help them. And sometimes we'd teach them about Moodle, sometimes we'd teach them about the library system, sometimes it was, we've got nothing to teach you, what can we help you with? But every fortnight, for 50 minutes, we saw every teacher and supported them. And then on top of it, when that person wasn't delivering these training sessions, they were available on call for one-on-one support with every teacher who asked for it. I refused to make Moodle compulsory in a school environment. You make something compulsory, it just gets backs up. Moodle was not compulsory. But our stats told us that we had over 80% of teachers using it. And I know these weren't special teachers. No offence to the Riverview teachers, they're wonderful. But I mean, they were normal teachers. Average teaching age was 49, 50. Me and them had been teaching at the same school for 15 years. They were ranging in technical literacy from, oh my God, what is it, to I love it, can I have a space shuttle next, and everything in between. But the moment they were provided support, they thrived. The fact they knew they had someone on call to help them, they thrived. And by the way, my argument to my board, to my executive, was exactly the argument I just made to you now. Well, we give them time, when they're not working, they're actually in their office and they're actually building lesson plans and they're working on resources for their sessions. But we're not actually giving them time to do online stuff. If we're not going to do that, then how can we expect them to do these things? And through that argument, I finally wore them down, and the impact was significant. So feel free to take that story. It's true, it's my proudest moment at that school. Moving back forward. Moving back forward. Yes, that's the lack of caffeine talking. So, also want to come back to this idea of pedagogy. Now, we've talked about all these different ideas that underpin. I said that Moodle 2 allowed us to actually turn Moodle into a lesson planning tool rather than just this scaffolding tool where I put stuff. Well, again, let's forget about e-learning for a second and talk about teaching, about learning methodology. Our typical ways of teaching over the years have been doing things first of all like problem-based learning. Now, these aren't new paradigms, they've been around for years. Problem-based learning is the idea that students, rather than read, write, repetition, students will learn better if they actually have to problem solve, they have to figure out how to break it down. Maths teachers especially, it's very, in the early days, some people like to do repetition for times table. In Australia and I think in Europe, it's the Kumon system, which I was put through as a kid and hated. It wasn't about understanding things like times tables, it was about just memorizing times tables. And through memorization, I never understood how the numbers fitted together. I love Asian education with mathematics because even now, many primary school students around Asia are still given an abacus, because the great thing about an abacus, you're visualizing, you're seeing, instead of a digit, you're actually seeing how these units fit together. You're understanding the problem. And then as maths gets more advanced, as we get into algebraic equation, as we get into formulaic equation, things like calculus, the only way to learn it is to understand the function. The only way to understand the function is to rip it apart and solve a problem. We've been doing that for years. On top of that, we also have a strong focus on narrative-based learning. Now, people always get confused when I mention narrative. Narrative is not just fictional stories. I'll come to that in a second. Narrative is telling a story. I have been telling you a story for the past 50 minutes because the story starts at the beginning, has a middle, and an end. And A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D. I've been telling you a narrative. Even though I've had multiple points in different areas, by leading you through a story, it's easier for you to remember and go back, follow the path back to that part of the story that we were at, and then remember the bits that were relevant to that part of the story. So narrative can actually be lesson flow. Narrative can also be fictional. I saw a fantastic talk, Justin Hunt, who actually did that, who did that quote I brought up earlier. His presentation was fantastic. He did a presentation on zombie-based learning. And zombie-based learning was where he took this fictional narrative of zombies invading America, and yet inside that put geographical problems to teach geography. Zombies were invading, so we had to learn mapping skills. We could plot on a map where the zombies were coming from. So we had to learn basic mapping skills. And then we had to escape without being caught by the zombies once they overran. So we actually had to look at topographical maps and understand how to read the maps so we could plot the fastest way out. And then the story went on, but at one point we're going to now rebuild societies, had to go to city planning. All of these were standards as part of his curriculum that he had to teach, but it was using a narrative and problem combined to create an engaging atmosphere. And again, it wasn't a bell and whistle. It was just using pedagogy to underpin. And that, by the way, is what game-based learning is. Game-based learning isn't about going, here's a badge. No, that's not game-based learning. Game-based learning is not about, I built this world in Second Life where Macbeth is being acted out. What game-based learning is truly about is about taking problem and narrative to create environments in which students explore, solve, and drive their way through a story. And by the way, inside that methodology, yes, we can use those kinds of games. But you don't need to hand wave. Please just type into the chat. You know, I'm answering questions as they pop up. I'm an informal teacher. My classrooms are always kind of encourage a slight form of student anarchy. I believe anarchy is to be rewarded in education. You can also tweet that. Anarchy from students should be rewarded, not discouraged. But yes, and so we talk about game-based learning. Okay, accept some trinities, but don't distract me, Susan. So game-based learning, yes, we do use bells and whistles inside of it to create the engagement elements. But yeah, we talk about narrative, we talk about problems, and that's what drives it. And that's why game-based learning is actually not so new. People say, oh, it's this new thing, I can't get used to it. No, it's about just taking things that we've already been doing for years and just combining them. So, conclusions. I love it. I've just been warned in the background. I've only got a couple of minutes left, but we're actually right on time. So, what are we taking from this? In short, forget e-learning. E-learning does not exist. E-learning is not a new philosophy of how to deliver education. E-learning is a load of... Okay, you can't read me while I said it. Learning is what's important. And the more comfortable you can get your teachers to feel with the fact that how do we teach online is exactly the same as how we teach in the classroom, only the tools have changed. And yes, so then we need to provide information on how to use these tools. We need to provide training, we need to provide support. We need to provide the time it takes to build these lesson plans, these learning pathways, to assemble it the same way we would face to face. We need to put effort as an institution to design a room that's conducive to education, whatever that might be. You know, it's different with a child than it will be with an adult. It'll be different with a university than it is for a polytechnic. It'll be different for visual arts than it will be for a maths. But we need to build a room that suits, that encourages learning. We need to use narratives. We need to underpin it. Back to that line from my follower on Twitter. We need to underpin this technology with strong pedagogy, the same way we underpin our classroom teaching with strong pedagogy. This is nothing new. It's nothing different. We just need to change this thought around it. And so go back to that slide. And I think I coined it. I may not have. I'm sure someone else came up with it as well. But there is no such thing as e-learning because learning already has an E in it. It is really important to stress that and to break down those barriers, break down those fears, show them some experiences that you've got. And from there, I think you'll find that your teachers, that you and the teachers around you will start finding out they're getting a lot more out of it. And the last example I'll give, and I'm going to end on this note, is how many of you, we talk about the technology first, how many of you, either yourself or one of your peers, has put a forum into Moodle, and after they put a forum in, no one answered it. And they came up with a line that says, forums are crap, forums are awful, because I tried using one and no one responded. Has anybody ever had that experience, or had a friend that had that experience? Yeah, it happens a lot. It's common. When that happens, they then stop using the tool. I have been in a classroom and asked a question and had disglazed looks. I said, oh yeah, okay, so who can actually now tell me why was the Axis in World War II such a vital, at the end of World War I, such a vital lead-in to World War II and the assassination of King Ferdinand? What caused that? And you just get this look from the class that does this. It doesn't mean I stop asking questions. Instead I go, okay, let's put it differently. Why was the king assassinated? Why did someone kill him? And all of a sudden, the change of terminology I was being less specific. All of a sudden got a different response. And by the way, the one question that worked one year doesn't work the next. It's common sense in a classroom if I ask a question and don't get a response or they look confused, that I reword it. I don't stop asking questions. And that's, again, a fantastic example of what I mean by this face-to-face. We take the fear of the technology out of the mix. The forum didn't work because it was a bad forum or it's bad technology. You just didn't ask the right question. Why don't you try another one? Why don't you try rewording it? Why don't you try putting in the first couple of suggestions? Because sometimes I say, why was the princess or the king assassinated? I get a blank response. And then, well, look, what about if you think about the environment at the time? You know, was there a sense of unrest? Yeah, this is, again, common sense. It's teaching, but we adapt. So they're the conclusions. Hopefully you've got your own. So that's it. I'm out of time. The cane is appearing from the corner here. I'm about to be pulled out. But I really want to encourage you to keep the discussion going. Of course, there's a forum in this session space. You know, again, many people don't use them. I'm going to be keeping an eye on it. Put in your thoughts. Put in your disagreements. Put in where you think I've been too generalised. Again, I've intentionally been very generalised in my statements because I wanted to try and get some argument going, and you're all so boring and agreeing. And yet, I apologise for the Franken presentation. I do hope it still had a sense of flow. But yeah, they're the things I'm passionate about. And if we get passion back into education, well, you've always got to win. So that's it. Thank you for coming. Sessions again starting soon.
Much, Julian. Hi, this is Vinny again from the iMoot team in Pukunui. Thank you very much, Julian. That was awesome. And thank you, everybody, for participating.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Share the passion, share the knowledge, tweet it, Facebook it, talk about it, write a paper. More people spread this message, the sooner it will sink in. Blog it. Infect. That's right. Good educational practice is like an infection. It slowly gets around, but once it's there, it kind of hangs around for a few years. I'm actually not against Edmodo, Lee. It has its purpose. Again, that's always going down to what you're trying to achieve. I actually have an Edmodo account I've used for a couple of things. But again, for me, it's not about technology. It's about the right tool for the right job. I can't wait to have to go and see Twitter. I think there must be doing a quick glance at the screen. And when I said to mention the unicorn, people really have gone nuts on the unicorn. I think there's going to be lots of confusion when people wake up around the world seeing Riddle referred to as the magic unicorn. All right, I'm going to get out of here. I'm making you hang around. Thanks everybody for coming. I'll see you around iMoot.
You are currently the only person